in just a second. Okay, well, welcome everyone to our May Alive Academy. So excited for our topic and our presenter this month. I think we are really lucky to have Jennifer Bennett here from Volunteer Match to share her vast knowledge and wisdom on tips and tricks for recruiting volunteers online. My name is Rebecca Vierhoff-Kiss. I am in Columbus, Ohio, and I serve on the board of Alive, and I'm really excited to be your host for today. I'm just going to take us through a brief description of the agenda. I'll do a couple of housekeeping items, and then I will introduce our wonderful presenter for today. So here's what our agenda is. Like I said, housekeeping. I'll introduce Jennifer, and we will have some time at the end for questions and discussion. So please, as you are listening in and taking notes, think about questions that you have. We'll have some Q&A. If it is pertaining specifically to a concept that Jennifer is talking about, please feel free to put it either in the chat or the Q&A box, and Gretchen and I will be looking at that, and if it's timely, we'll say, hey, hold on a second, Jennifer, and we'll interrupt her so that she can answer those questions. But if it's a general question, then please feel free to ask that at the end of the presentation. And then please do stay to the end. We have a few announcements from Alive that we will get in right before we're finished on the hour at 3 o'clock. So, general housekeeping, please make sure that you're muted if you are not speaking. We do prefer chat box to ask questions, so please use the chat or the Q&A function. And if you really need to come off of mute, you can raise your hand. And just so you know, we are recording this session. The deck as well as the recording will be on the Alive member side under the file archive. So Gretchen's really good about getting those up in a timely manner. So if you want to reference anything, or there are other Alive members in your network that missed the call today, know that you'll have access to that as Gretchen gets that on the Alive site. So, as I mentioned, we are super excited to have Jennifer Bennett here, and I'm going to provide a brief introduction before I hand her the reins, and she can take us through her great presentation. So, Jennifer is the Director of Education and Training at Volunteer Match. She shares her knowledge with volunteer managers through webinars found on the Volunteer Match Learning Center, in newsletters and blog entries, and at conferences around the country. She also co-hosts the Time and Talent podcast with Toby Johnson from Volunteer Pro, which finished its 4th season in December of 2022. She's a strong believer in the importance of engaging volunteers in meaningful work and was certified in volunteer administration in 2009, and she serves as a director of knowledge on the board of the Council for Certification in Volunteer Administration. She currently volunteers with the Justice and Diversity Center and Project Homelessness Connect in San Francisco, and with the Social Justice Sewing Academy. Jennifer is very much a thought leader in this space, and we're thrilled to have her with us today. So please join me in welcoming Jennifer Bennett to our Academy.
Thanks, Rebecca. Hi, everybody. I'm excited to be here, and I'm going to be talking a little bit about how we can go about recruiting volunteers. So I am going to share these slides. There we go. But mostly what we're going to be doing today is actually looking at some before and afters on Volunteer Match. So I come from Volunteer Match, so we're going to focus on that platform, but a lot of what we're going to talk about today for tips and tricks are going to be useful for recruiting anywhere, whether you're recruiting on your own website, if you're using another online website, if you're recruiting through a partner or a volunteer center in your community. We really want to think about how we put our message out there, know who we're looking for, and then think about how we can sort of integrate recruiting online with some of the other ways that we recruit. And I know we've all been thinking about recruitment as a challenge. I didn't add it into this deck, but sometimes I add in one of the graphs from Toby Johnson's Volunteer Management Progress Report, which shows the top challenges. And recruitment is always up there in like the top 3. So I think when we think about recruitment, it's definitely shifting. And if you were able to join us at Volunteer Match when we talked about our survey data from volunteers, one of the things that we're hopeful about is that people do want to get back out there, that they're looking to volunteer more next year. But we have to understand what they're looking for, what we need, and sort of tying that all together. So the recruitment message and what we're going to focus on today is really sort of the last step. It's not the first step. And I think we have this sort of 3 R's model. Sometimes we've heard that in volunteer engagement: recruitment, retention, and recognition. And this idea that maybe we put them in sort of a life cycle. So it's like a circle with arrows connecting them. But really, when I think about this, it's all about relationship building. So we want to think about that one big R. And to do that, we need to think about who we need before we start recruiting, who's going to train them, what's their first minute, hour, day going to look like with us? How are we going to follow up with them? The idea of just like putting a volunteer opportunity up somewhere online and hoping that the right volunteer finds you is really not sort of making the best use of the tools and the platforms that are out there. So we're going to really talk about designing those opportunities, those recruitment messages that help you find the volunteers that you're looking for. So if you don't know who you're looking for, I always believe in starting with that position description. That for me is the cornerstone of my foundation for volunteer engagement. I can't know who to recruit. I don't know what they need to be good at. I don't know how to train them. I don't know how to provide meaningful experiences for them if I don't know what they're going to be doing. So that is my blueprint. And then from there, looking at volunteer personas. If you're not familiar with volunteer personas, actually Toby Johnson has a great blog article on it. I'm happy to share information. My contact information will be up at the end, so feel free to reach out to me. I'm also on LinkedIn if you want a persona worksheet or if you want to talk more about this. But volunteer personas is also borrowed from marketing. I'm going to talk a little bit more about borrowing from marketing in a minute. But volunteer personas are sort of a sketch of who you think might be the right volunteer for this role. And it could be something where you've talked to your existing volunteers and you sort of figure out who's really good at this work or who keeps coming back or who just seems to get it. And you sort of create a picture of who they are. What does their background look like? What motivation do they have for coming to volunteer? What kinds of professional skills or job experience do they have? What kinds of hobbies do they have? What kind of characteristics do they have? And we sort of paint this picture of who would be this superstar volunteer. And we might have more than one persona for a role. We might have several. There might be a few types of people we're looking for to come in and do that work. But when we have a persona, then we can start talking directly to that person. So I said we borrowed this from marketing. If you do anything with designing websites or interfaces, we also at Volunteer Match talk about our user personas. So for example, one of the personas that we think about, volunteers that come to Volunteer Match to find an opportunity, are example setting parents. We know that there are people who are going to come and try to find a volunteer opportunity where their whole family can volunteer and they can show their kids what it means to give back. So we think about that. That's why we have that filter that's like great for groups or great for kids, thinking about what's going to stop them from finding volunteer opportunities. How can we solve those problems for them? How can can we tell them the information that they're looking for? So that idea of a persona can be applied to volunteers. What's going to stop someone from volunteering with your organization? What might be compelling to overcome that challenge? What do they need to know or do or be to be successful in your organization? So we're going to borrow that from marketing. We're also going to borrow some marketing approaches with regards to how we communicate, what we share, how we prioritize information when we're recruiting online. And we're going to look, as I said, I have access to Volunteer Match, so we're going to look at it. It's going to be live. I don't seed anything. We're going to take a look at real Volunteer Match and see what works and what doesn't work. And then I do have some opportunities that I have found on Volunteer Match and that I've taken the information off of so nobody gets embarrassed. And we'll take a look at some before and afters of recruitment messages and see where we might be able to apply some of those tips and tricks, those best practices to really connect with volunteers. So I know sometimes that idea of marketing language can feel like sometimes it's a dirty word, like we're borrowing from marketing, but they know what they're doing over there. So I'd encourage you to stick with me as we think about how we can best reach those volunteers that we're looking for. So when I was building out these tips and tricks and these best practices, I took a look at Volunteer Match because I have access to all of the information that's going on, so we should use it. But recruiting volunteers online is really just another tool. It's another way to recruit volunteers. We do a user survey every year. I talked a little bit about some of the research that we've done with our volunteer users earlier this year, but we also ask nonprofits to weigh in on their experience. And up until after the pandemic, so up until 2021, word of mouth was the top recruitment way that people found volunteers for their organization. And then it switched and now it's online platforms. So we are definitely seeing that continuing out of the pandemic. I don't know if it's going to stay as number one, but right now online recruitment sites are the #1 ways that volunteer managers tell us that they get volunteers into their organization. Word of mouth is still up there. We might also think about partnerships with other community organizations. Some of you might be recruiting on the radio or by flyering or with other community-based organizations. So there's a lot of ways to bring volunteers in. We're going to talk today, as I said, about that online recruitment. So as I said, I have access to everything that happens on Volunteer Match. So I took a look at 100 opportunities on Volunteer Match that were very popular, meaning they were getting a lot of connections, a lot of interest, a lot of people clicking through. And then I took a look at 100 opportunities that didn't have any connections. Nobody was interested in them. And I tried to figure out what I could deduce about those two groups. What was different about the groups? What was the same within those groups, and where we might be able to drive some of these best practices. So as I said, while I'm certainly most familiar with Volunteer Match, this is really about, as I said, creating that relationship with volunteers. This is about starting that conversation. This is about prioritizing information. This is about using language that's welcoming and telling the story in the right way, starting in the right place. So all of that can be achieved on other sites as well, including your own website. So if you have a volunteer with us section and you just have posted your volunteer position descriptions, maybe at the end of today's session, you'll think about how you might be able to put some of that language in there, put some of that sort of connection to the mission, a call to action in there to really attract the volunteers that you're looking for. So I've broken this down into 8 easy steps, and that seems like a lot, but I'm guessing that a lot of them go together. When we look at Volunteer Match, you'll see that the title is the first thing that you see, and that's probably going to be true for any website that you're using to recruit online, if you're recruiting on social media, if you're recruiting on your own website. That title is the first thing that someone's going to look at and decide if they want to learn more or if they want to move on. So when I started at Volunteer Match, which to be fair was a very long time ago now, overwhelmingly the opportunities had titles like volunteers needed. And I think that that was a lag in sort of recruiting from maybe a flyer based perspective, like you're on the bulletin board at the community center competing with babysitting and free kittens. And so volunteers needed stood out. But now, you know, we really need to rethink our first message and the opportunities that we see that have catchy titles or fun titles, interesting titles are the ones that really do get the most eyes. So for a very long time, the #1 most popular opportunity on Volunteer Match was from an organization here in the San Francisco Bay Area. And they had a title that it's for the San Francisco school volunteers. So they're volunteers that go into the school and help with after school support and mentoring. And their title was, "Are you good at math? Become a tutor," right? Really easy, straightforward, but it asks a question. And I think they're doing a couple of really smart things there. First, by asking, "Are you good at math?" They're weeding out the people who aren't going to be good math tutors, because some people are going to read that and think, "I am not good at math, I am moving on." But it catches enough of those people who say, "I am good at math, I could be interested in being a tutor, I want to learn more." So we see fun ones too. Another one from the San Francisco Bay Area. We have the Charles Schulz Museum from Peanuts here in the Bay Area. And they had a title for one of their opportunities that was "Come and Work for Peanuts," which is a, you know, sort of a joke on the fact that you're volunteering, you're not getting paid at all. So it's not even peanuts, but you're working for peanuts. So something to stand out. We also see good titles that are descriptive, like, "Are you a such and such expert? Do you speak Spanish?" Asking those questions to help a volunteer decide if they want to learn more. We've also learned, and again, this is borrowing from the best practices for just putting information online, is that we want to keep it brief. About 100 words is the sweet spot. Now, if you have more than that, that's okay, but it's not 1,000 words, right? We're sort of trying to get the beginning of a conversation, the beginning of a story. I still see a lot of people who sort of have that open door policy. Like, if you can open the door, you can volunteer with us. Like, come volunteer with us. We need so much help. Just come, and then we'll figure out what you want to do. But actually what we see works best is when you tailor it to those personas, as I was talking about. Are you good at math? Do you have time in the afternoon? Are you interested in helping kids learn more about math so that they can be successful in high school and college? Telling that story in that sort of, it's a funnel, right? Like bringing them in all the way down the funnel to being, this is you and this is how you can help. If it feels broad, if it feels like the work, there's so much work to be done, people will actually step away from it. That it's when we say, this is who you are, this is how you can help us, and this is the difference you can make, that we get the most connection. Someone wants to be able to envision themselves in it. So post as many opportunities as you need to describe to fill all of your opportunity roles. And I always encourage everyone on Volunteer Match to post more than one opportunity if there's different personas that you're looking for. If this is a learning opportunity for someone in school, if this is also an opportunity for someone who's retired, if this is also an opportunity for someone to do some work virtually, I would post all of those personas as separate opportunities. And we'll take a look at that in just a minute. Again, about 100 words. If it's 150, that's okay. If it's 1,000, really make sure you're thinking about the words that you're using. You just don't have people's attention spans that long. I sometimes think about, like, when you're looking for something, you do a Google search and you open something up and it's just like a giant paragraph of words, and then you exit out and go to Wikipedia because you know you'll be able to skim it easily for the answer that you're looking for. It's kind of like that, right? It's how we look for information online. This might be the first time someone learns more about your organization, or might be the first time that someone learns about your organization at all, especially if you're posting on a place like Volunteer Match or on the Volunteer Center. So we want to make sure that we're using straightforward language, that we're making it easy to understand. No jargon, no acronyms. I try not to pick on people, but I'm going to pick on the Red Cross overall. I'm not pick on them. I'm going to point out an opportunity that they have to recruit better. They have an opportunity that they call a DAT volunteer, and they post it as like DAT team volunteers needed or DAT volunteers needed on Volunteer Match all the time. DAT stands for Disaster Action Team. Like if I was skimming through and looking at opportunities, I don't know what a DAT or a DAT volunteer is, but a disaster action team volunteer sounds kind of cool. It might not be a good fit for me. I'm not great in like all those kinds of situations sometimes, but I certainly would want to learn more about it. I would want to learn what that means. Like, do I get like superpowers? How do I get involved? So make sure that when you're using your internal acronyms, that you're thinking about how you can describe that, or where writing something out might be better for someone who doesn't know much about your organization. I'm going to tell another really quick example here. When we started working with the California libraries and their literacy programs, we talked about literacy all the time, literacy this, literacy that, and we never said don't put literacy in your opportunities, right? But we were talking about the other piece of this when you're building your personas and you're figuring out your message. The other side of this is asking your existing volunteers how they talk about the work. Sit down with a cup of coffee and some donuts, or even over Zoom, and get your volunteers to tell you how they describe their work to their friends and family, and then echo that language back in your recruitment message, because you're starting to then build those personas and talk to the people who are like the great volunteers that you have. And so we did that with some of the literacy volunteers. And what we learned was that none of them used the word literacy. They used words like reading and teaching and mentoring, because literacy is a little jargony, right? It's not colloquial. It's not how you would describe it to your friend. You might say, oh, I volunteer with the adult literacy program. I teach people to read. So or help them build their reading skills. So we want to make sure we have both of those in there. So if somebody's not exactly sure what some of the more formal language means, we're describing it with more everyday language, the way you would tell your friend. The other piece when we think about this message is that this is not just a laundry list of what you need, right? This is not just come on Wednesdays and we need someone to do X and work with the children on their homework, on math skills, or whatever that is. There's another piece to this. This is about what's in it for the volunteer. When we go on Volunteer Match, depending on where you are, there might be thousands of other opportunities that people are looking through. So you want to make sure that yours stands out, that you're telling people why they should volunteer with you, how they can help, what they're going to get out of it, how they're going to make a difference in their community or make a difference in the life of a child or your client, and that you're including a strong call to action. So when we think about volunteering from word of mouth, a lot of times people volunteer because they're asked, like, hey, can you help with this? Or I think you'd be a really good fit for this new initiative this nonprofit's working on. Do you want to come learn more about it? We can apply that same people volunteer because they're asked to online recruitment. So including a strong call to action, get involved, start today, learn more now, you can help us, get involved. Whatever that sounds like for your organization and for your roles, we want to make sure that that invitation comes in. I oftentimes think about it as if I was having a face-to-face conversation with someone. If someone came up to me ran into me in the grocery store and asked me what I was doing, or I was at a recruitment fair or an event and somebody said, what's it like to volunteer at Volunteer Match? I wouldn't start with, well, we need someone who's available on Wednesdays who, could do X, Y, and Z, I would say, oh my gosh, Volunteer Match is so amazing. Let me tell you what we're doing. Let me tell you how you can help us. Let me tell you what you might be able to work on or contribute. I might also ask some questions. What do you want to do with your volunteer time? So we can apply that to a recruitment message so that we're really starting to have almost a two-way conversation, even if it's just just on the screen. The other thing we want to do when we think about this is making sure that we're providing direction and support. So that idea that like any old person can do this, that might not be true. And even if most everyone can do it, as I talked about, the more specific we can be, the more likely we are to recruit the right volunteers. So while we can find a place for everyone, if we know that someone needs to be a good listener or detail oriented or comfortable talking to strangers or really good at organizing, whatever that might be, we can put that in our recruitment message. We're going to get more of those people, right, that we're looking for. So building off those personas. If there's a time commitment, if we're clear about why it matters, we need volunteers who can volunteer a couple of afternoons during the school week, Monday through Friday from September to May, because our students don't have reliable adults in their life, and it's really important that they build a relationship with our volunteers. So while it might feel like a lot of time, it's flexible enough between what day you come that we'll find a schedule that works for you. Whatever that sounds like for your organization, that we're clear about it. We're clear about training. And I'll show you in our examples that we encourage you to say, like, we'll provide the training that you need, or we're going to offer guidance and ongoing training so that volunteers don't feel like they have to know everything, or that volunteers can be assured that they'll get the support that they need. If you have any restrictions, background checks, age requirements, if they have to have a driver's license, whatever that might be, putting that in there as well. We don't have to dwell on it. It doesn't have to be all the curriculum for the training. It doesn't have to be all the specifics, but the idea here being that we're giving volunteers that opportunity for them to say, oh gosh, that isn't me, or I don't have a driver's license, or I don't feel comfortable driving other people, or I'm not sure about going through a background check, that they have that in their mind. And this is not irony, but this is a little bit of irony here where I say make it visually appealing, and then that's the one that doesn't have a bullet point. But the idea that it's not just a wall of words like I talked about, that we're including pictures or videos, something that helps a volunteer see what that work might be like or envision themselves in it. Sometimes we get pictures on Volunteer Match that are like volunteers with their arms around each other, like wearing matching shirts at the end of the day. Those are great pictures to take. We should include those in our volunteer appreciation videos. But when we're recruiting, show your volunteers in action. Show them working with clients if possible, or in the environment that they're going to be in, so that volunteers can again sort of get an idea of what it's like. Make good use of white space. I mentioned about 100 words. We've found that 3 short paragraphs of 3 sentences or less with space between them is sort of the ideal format for people to be able to skim and find what they're looking for. I mentioned those volunteer opportunities that nobody was interested in. 100% of them had spelling errors, 80% of them had grammar mistakes. This is your opportunity to put your best face forward. Make sure that you're representing your organization in a way that resonates, that gives people confidence in your ability to engage them because you've taken the time to, run a spell check, look at the grammar. As Volunteer Match employees, we are not allowed to go in and edit people's volunteer opportunities. When they post them, that's up to them, what they put. We don't police or monitor that in any way. But I've told this story before, so you might have heard it. I have, at one point, I did go in and edit someone's opportunity because they had written volunteers must be able to stand for the entire shift, but they had left the F out. And in some organizations, you might also have to be able to stand for that. But I felt like that was really not a good representation of their organization. So please, please, please spell check. And then also look at your listing as if you were a volunteer. Ask someone else to look at it. Spell check might not catch something like that, or like there and they are, those kinds of, like, it's a real word, it's just in the wrong place, or it's the wrong word in the right place. So really take time to look at it, to think, if a volunteer read this, would they understand what they're looking for? Is there a good, strong call to action? Do they understand why this work matters? And that, is there anything else I can do to make this clearer? You can ask a spouse or a friend who's not familiar with what you do to read it. You can ask a volunteer to read it. And then I know this sounds like work. This is also a really great role for a volunteer. I don't know who all we have on today, but we do have some national nonprofits that have national accounts with Volunteer Match, and they have volunteers running their Volunteer Match account. So writing this language, making sure the titles stand out. This is a great role for maybe somebody who's new to marketing and wants to get some experience under their belt, or somebody who's a seasoned professional to come in and just zhuzh up your recruitment messages. So you don't have to do this all yourself, but realistically, this might only take a few minutes to do. Also, if you're interested in things like AI and ChatGPT, I don't know, maybe run it through ChatGPT and put something in there about recruitment and see what comes up. I haven't done that yet, but I've been playing around with, it's called Notion, which is like an integration for the AI with regards to some of those messages that go out, like your opportunities are expiring, or have you considered recruiting volunteers on Volunteer Match? So not to say that we just run it and through AI and then cut and paste it and use it without personalizing it, but it's a brave new world out there. So something to think about. All right, so I am going to switch gears and we're going to look at Volunteer Match. We're going to look at some opportunities before and after. But before we do, Gretchen, Rebecca, are there any questions coming in that talk about best practices before we get to the rest of it?
Just one question from Jen. She asks, are there some jobs that just aren't attractive?
Oh, that's a good question. I would say there are some jobs that are not appealing to a wide variety of people, but I would say we are constantly amazed at Volunteer Match on what kinds of really specific roles that people are interested in. And so that's where I think we need to think about our personas. So if you cannot envision a single person who's interested in doing that role, then maybe you need to go back to the drawing board. I would also say, if when you build out your volunteer persona, when you build out your position description, if that volunteer role doesn't have any real responsibilities or any decision-making authority, I might go back to the drawing board there as well. Because even if someone's just coming for an afternoon, they still want to have some autonomy, right? They don't want to like do something and then wait for you to tell them to do the next thing, and then do the next thing, and then wait for them to tell you to do the next thing. So where do they get to in a few minutes learn how to be good at something? I think a good example of that is, our food banks, where with just a few minutes of instruction, you've got volunteers making decisions. I personally have done that, where they're like, here's a giant box of apples, sort out the good ones from the smushy ones. Or here's a big bag of rice, use this machine to make small bags of rice. You can pretty quickly get up to speed on that. And you might have some questions like, hey, we've finished bagging up all the rice, what do we do next? But you've given them a good amount of time where they're deciding, like, is this apple too squashy? So that's some decision-making authority. It's not necessarily high-level decision-making authority, but there's something in there that people can own and take responsibility for. So I would say, if you can't come up with that, what that is in your job, or if you can't think of the person for whom that job might be interesting or attractive, if you don't have anyone doing it now, you might have to go back to the drawing board. I will say, in all of my years of working with volunteers, when you tell the story, and when you find the right person. Some of you know I got my start in the wildlife rehabilitation and conservation field. And that's a lot of messy, messy laundry. And our laundry room was kind of always a disaster. And when we started asking volunteers when they came in, like, what are you good at? What do you like? When someone would say, you know, I'm really good at like organizing, or I really like to see like accomplishments visually, like to see what I've done. We found people who like became like the laundry room czar, right? And it like ran smoothly, and there were instructions on how to do everything, and everything was labeled, and there was like a process for folding stuff. When you find those volunteers, you just kind of let them go, but you have to know who you're looking for. You have to know what the ownership is for that role. So you will find someone behind the scenes. There are people who don't want to do client-facing work. There are people who love organization. At Volunteer Match, when we moved our office, which was ironically right before the pandemic, and now we don't have an office anymore, we like had a volunteer come in to help us go through 20 years of files. And we gave her like the list from the lawyer of what we had to keep. And then we gave her a list of things to be on the lookout for. And she owned that project. And she went through like 35 big filing cabinets and like destroyed and scanned and stored all of those documents. Like, that's not a fancy, you know, sexy job, but there's somebody out there for whom making all those filing cabinets pretty and like finishing those checklists, that is the thing that they want to do with their volunteer time. All right, so let's take a look at Volunteer Match. I'm going to exit out of here. And then in my slides, you'll see I've got some samples of what we're going to talk about next. So this is Volunteer Match. If you've been on Volunteer Match, this probably looks a little bit familiar. I have an extra thing right here because I can see back end stuff. So just ignore that part, but when we get into the dashboard, it will look the same. So if I just do a search, and this is nationwide, this is oftentimes how I look at Volunteer Match because I want to see what's going on. I'm going to move my toolbar up here. There we go. So this is literally just a live search in Volunteer Match, no filtering, nothing. I just want to see what comes up. So we've got some, looks like an internship project. Again, this is an opportunity to really think about your title. I'd also say this is an important opportunity to understand the platform that you're recruiting on. So on Volunteer Match, we have those first two sentences showing up in search results. Not everybody does. So if you are on that site, take a look at what it looks like before you post your opportunity. What do you need to know? What opportunities do you have? On Volunteer Match, I always encourage people to tie their title and their first couple of sentences together. So the other thing to think about is, where does it get cut off? So this is clearly something that's like long, right? We don't know what's happening next. Tighten that language up. Put the most important information first. So I would say, again, I'm not going to poke at somebody on live on Volunteer Match, but you know, again, where do you have that opportunity? This looks like it might be elderly blind clients or people. I might flip this around, like whatever this says might be really interesting. Help an elderly blind woman with errands. I don't know, maybe, like, what's the impact there? So you want to think about that. You want to think about the story that you're trying to tell. Sometimes I find really good ones, and sometimes I don't. So, okay, here we go. So many ways to bring a smile to a senior's face. Check out, blah, blah, blah. So maybe this then becomes the first sentence, right? Like knowing the platform that you're on, knowing where you have that opportunity to really appeal to people. Volunteers needed, right? That's not the best use of your title, but look, bring joy, comfort, and peace to our hospice patients by using your creative gifts and presence. That's pretty darn good. I like that. That resonates. I mean, you know, it stands out. It tells you a little bit about what you're doing and why that work matters. So maybe that title just needs a little bit of zhuzhing up. So anyway, that's, I think the first thing is to think about where your opportunities are showing up. And we have on Volunteer Match also that if you have something where you do post 1,500 opportunities, we will only show the first one because otherwise it would be the first 15 pages would be this organization. So we do have a few organizations that take advantage of the site, and we are working on that. We are trying to make it better for volunteers and better for smaller organizations. I don't want to get into that too much, but that's something to think about as well. If you do post a lot, they may not all show up because we don't want our search results to be sort of overwhelmed. But all right, so that's what search looks like. Let's take a look at some opportunities. This is my dashboard. You may only have one organization. This is our organization.
Hey, Jennifer, sorry, I'm just gonna interrupt you because it has to do with your previous screen. So Angela asks, what are suggestions to be closer to the top of the page for searches? Do we need to be a paying member for Volunteer Match or for other sites?
I don't know about other sites. On Volunteer Match, if you are using our premium tools, which is the fee-based account, you can repost, meaning bringing your opportunities back up to the top of search results. If you are not, anytime you want, like you could do it every day if you wanted. So it's a little different because I did a whole United States-based search, so we're seeing a wider variety of opportunities. If a volunteer does a search with their location, their city or their zip code, our default search results are new and near to you. That's hard to say. It's easier to read. So that means newest and localist. So it would be the ones that are closest to my zip code and the ones that have been either posted or updated most recently. So with the paying tool, you can bring it up to the top of search results whenever you want. If you're using our basic account, you can go in every 30 days and like change anything on your opportunity and it will bump it back up to the top of search results. So it really depends on what Volunteer Match looks like in your community. And I would say the same is probably true for other searches or other search sites as well. Understand what their default settings are and then understand what it looks like in your area. Because if you are in a more rural area, you may not need to repost as often. If you're in a major metro area, you may need to repost regularly or use keywords, which we'll talk about in just a minute, to help narrow down those search results. So what I just did, practically no volunteer does. Most volunteers come to us because they do a search that says like, animal volunteer opportunities near me on Google, and then they get to Volunteer Match's homepage. I don't want to take up too much time here, so please, if you want to reach out to me and we'll talk specifically about your account or recruiting in your community, I am happy to do that. I'm also always happy to review your opportunities and offer suggestions. So let's take a look at an opportunity that is maybe not doing the best job that it could do. I'm going to pick one here. We've been talking about food pantries, so let's take a look at this one. I'm not going to make you watch me type this. So this title, I think, could use a little bit of zhuzhing, right? Just a little bit of like, what does this mean? What's the impact? Who should you be? As we come down here, there's some good stuff in here, right? Especially, well, they've put this link here, and I should have taken this out because we could probably now, we're not going to poke at them. But we really encourage you to leave your opportunities on Volunteer Match. It helps you know if you're doing a good job, but it also helps make sure that volunteers are getting all the information that they need. So if we scroll down, this first sentence.
Hey, Jennifer, I don't think we're seeing the pop out.
Because of Zoom. Sorry, I have to share the, I always forget with Zoom, it's different. Give me a second. When I open a pop-up, we have to go to the pop-up. All right, sorry about that, everyone. Should be good now. We're seeing food pantry support in Central Oregon.
Yep, we're good.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so here you can see the first sentence, actually pretty good job, right? This is who we are. Maybe not the most important piece of information. I think I would put it in my first paragraph, but I might put something else in here that is more like, you know, your neighbors could use support, or have you ever had a situation where you have to decide between buying groceries and putting gas in your car? Can you imagine how tough that would be? Here's how you can help, right? So really starting to make that connection. Remember what I said about the wall of words? Like, this is a lot of information. I feel like we could use some paragraphs in here. We could use some editing in here. It's written like you might read, like you have more time to read. People are skimming, so we want to prioritize that information. The other thing is that you saw, I clicked that read more. So we want to make sure that the important information shows up at the top. Now they're using some bolding here. It's a little bit more easy to read. They've also posted it in Spanish, which if it was me, I would post this as two opportunities, one in English and one in Spanish with the Spanish title, because I'm looking for Spanish speakers. So not the best opportunity to take a look at, right? But it helps set the stage. Oh, sorry. It helps set the stage. So we'll go back to the dashboard and take a look at some opportunities that are doing a good job, some of the better ones that I've found on Volunteer Match. Let's see, this one I really like, also from the Pacific Northwest. So, oh wait, hang on, I'm gonna get it. There we go. Challenge stereotypes, empower women, learn how to build. So this is from Habitat for Humanity. And again, not poking at anyone, but I think, you know, this is from the Pacific Northwest. So they maybe have, they know their audience. They've maybe done some persona work. Come join us at our local build site for our Women Build Volunteer Days. Which, like, what an interesting idea, and what a really nice example of targeted recruitment, right? Like, maybe I've always wanted to go and do this, but I don't know, like, I don't know how to use power tools. Or the other thing that they have in here too is that you don't have to come with a group, like just come by yourself. You can also come alone and make new friends. It's collaborative and friendly. No experience is necessary to participate, right? We're going to share with you whether you're learning new skills or just simply adding to your tool belt. This is a rewarding experience. They've added in open to everyone 18 and older. Now this is more than 100 words, but it's not much more than 100 words. And if I was getting all the good stuff in the beginning and I wanted to learn more, I could learn more about the sort of, again, those deal breakers or direction and support, wear closed-toed shoes and long pants, and make sure you bring your water bottle and sunscreen. So this is a really good example of something that's sort of similar, right? It's a similar time commitment. It's a similar sort of expectation on like what the time frame is. We're not coming to like sign up for a long period of time, but it's a nice way to get the important information out, to really think about who you want to have in your organization as a volunteer, and then tell a story specifically to them. All right. I think it's going to kick me out again, and then we're going to take a look at another one. And please bear with me. There we go. All right, so if I go back, we can take a look at one that's a longer sort of format, right? Somebody who is going to volunteer on a regular basis. So let's take a look at this one. This is a opportunity for after school tutoring, after school mentoring. And again, it's that call to action and that impact statement right there in the title. Kids are struggling with reading. You can be a fantastic tutor. Maybe I can. I'd like to learn more about that. All you need is a caring heart and a desire to empower a child to learn. And this is for Experience Corps. So it's for volunteers that are 50 or older. So that information is prioritized, right? If you're 18 and you want to do peer tutoring, this isn't the role for you. So we want to, again, make sure if there's decision decisions that need to be made by the volunteer, that we are giving them that opportunity to get that information sooner rather than later. And you want to make a real and lasting impact on the life of a child, you could be the volunteer we're looking for. So I really like it when organizations put the could or might be in there, because this still implies that there's going to be screening that takes place, immune interview or background check or training. Look, here is a volunteer reading to kids or working with them on reading, and they're in their little school outfits. Now, of course, if we're posting pictures of clients, we want to be careful. We want to be thoughtful. I have seen pictures like this done where the kids, you just see the backs of the kids' heads. If you're worried or concerned about like school information, whether this might be a school hoodie, that we're making sure that it's just regular clothes, whatever makes your clients and your organization comfortable, it's okay to stage these photos. They don't have to be like really live. They can be edited or posed. You can have a photo shoot to make sure that it's following all the rules that you need it to follow. But putting something like that, or in Volunteer Match's case, you can also put a video up that people can watch. So that's something to think about, where you can like paint that picture. A picture is worth 1,000 words. Then they have a little paragraph here about tutors, the training, materials, coaching. This is an ongoing role, so that they do put that in here as well as that third paragraph is about the commitment. This gives them a chance to build a strong, supportive relationship and serve as a role model for students as they help them build literacy. I'm guessing the next word is skills. I might have tried to edit this a little bit more so that the end of that sentence shows up before read more, because it's so short and so quick. And maybe if we had just, picked a different word or used an ampersand or something, again, this matters so that people feel like they can continue on. So again, I wanted to show you guys real opportunities that I have done my best and sometimes not done the best work of making anonymous, but we're not like calling anyone out and saying they're doing a bad job. What we're saying is this is an opportunity to do something better, to try something a little bit different, to maybe recruit more of the volunteers that you're looking for, or a better fit for the volunteers that are coming into your organization. So I love this call to action. I wish it showed up before the show more button. So again, can you edit? Can you play around with words? Can you make something show up so that it all is there on one page and people don't have to get to that next piece? All right, so I want to make sure we have time for questions. I am going to go back and I have a little summary slide somewhere here.
We're looking for that, Jennifer. I do have one question from the Q&A that came up. So Elizabeth asked, any suggestions for photos for remote positions where we're not with the volunteers when they're participating, like a peer mentor or a support group, or administrative work where the work is just at a computer?
Yeah, I think, that does get tougher because obviously you want people to be able to see themselves in that work. But if you can, maybe it's a picture of clients, maybe it's a picture of, the work that's being done, or if there's samples or examples of, like, if you're looking for a graphic designer. We've also, on Volunteer Match, I've also posted like people at their computer. So maybe it's because we are all remote. We sometimes use pictures of our website, like, look how bad this is, you could make it better, when we're recruiting for skills-based volunteers. Maybe it's a Zoom picture of like, this is the team and here we're doing something fun, or sticky notes. But I'd encourage you to play around with it, like see what works, ask your volunteers, ask your prospective volunteers, like what made you pick this opportunity. It's all, again, borrowing from our friends in marketing, we sometimes have to do a little bit of market research to figure out what's the best fit. So when we think about posting these opportunities, whether it's Volunteer Match or on another site, a volunteer center, your own site, they may not know much about your organization. They may not know much about what it's like to be a volunteer. we will still have those volunteers coming to us through word of mouth, right? The volunteers that know about us, that are familiar with our programs, that come in with a little bit of background or a little bit of prior knowledge. Often when they're finding you online, they don't know much. So we want to use that welcoming language. We want to really prioritize that information that we share. What's that next best first sentence, right? So you've got your good title that pulls people in, and then we want to ask questions or prioritize that information about impact, stating your needs. Of course, what do you need a volunteer to be able to do? But what do they get out of this? What's different or better because they volunteered? How can they make a difference? What skills can they learn? What skills can they use? How can they participate? Can they be part of a community? That's another really interesting thing to think about. And we saw that with the Habitat for Humanity example of like, you can bring your friends or you can make friends. This is an opportunity to get back out after the pandemic. What are those sort of benefits for a volunteer? If you have deal breakers, we saw that with the Experience Corps volunteer opportunity. You have to be over 50 to participate in this. Or do you have to be over the age of 18? Do you have to go through a background check? And then this is really about spending just a few minutes or recruiting a volunteer to help you spend a few minutes crafting opportunities that will attract those volunteers that you need or that you're looking for. And again, we go back to the beginning where we talk about who are you looking for? It's not just any person who can open the door is the right volunteer. There are volunteers that are better suited or better poised to hit the ground running within your organization. Do you need someone who can make that longer term commitment? Do you need someone who can come on a Saturday and just jump in and roll up their sleeves and there's very low barriers to participation? Or do you need someone to go through 40 hours of training and a background check and commit to 2 afternoons every week during the school year? And the way you think about who you need drives how you write your messages, how you tell your stories, how you recruit. And then this is just that first piece. Remember, this is not, we don't just abandon them and like fingers crossed hope that they have a good time. This is all about building relationships. And that relationship starts when we have that position description. We've thought about who's onboarding, who's training, who's making sure that that experience is as it should be, or that questions are answered and that volunteers have decision-making authority. But that's a whole series of webinars, and we don't have time for all of that today. But here is my contact information. You can find Volunteer Match on Facebook or Twitter. That's my direct email address and my Twitter handle. My direct email address is always the best way to reach me. So if you have questions about Volunteer Match, you want me to take a look at your opportunities and provide some guidance, I'm always happy to do that.
Great, thank you, Jennifer. So this is we've got a couple minutes for Q&A. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat or the Q&A. I do have one question for you, Jennifer, right this second.
Yeah.
So Rebecca asked, how do you handle opportunities that could be in several locations? We have a 13 county footprint, and for some of the opportunities, we place them based on client location and volunteer location throughout their volunteer journey. Do you post them separately for each county or city?
That's a really good question, and it would depend. I'm only super familiar with Volunteer Match. So on Volunteer Match, we have multiple locations. So that's an opportunity that you we see it used for things like hospice, right? Where you might be visiting a client in their home, and that could be spread out all over. If you have very spread out areas, I would probably post one for each county or for each metro area. Volunteer Match's default is a 20-mile search radius. That's our near you, but then volunteers can make it larger or smaller based on what they see. But I would probably on Volunteer Match use multiple locations and post one for each county, or if there's like a city in the middle of each county, just post, like you don't have to put a street address, you can just put like the city name and the zip code. Sometimes people use like City Hall, and then say multiple locations. And I would just be clear in my description about what the process is for how someone gets matched to a client. And then my first question to that volunteer would be like, what area are you in and how far are you willing to go to volunteer? So that you're sort of thinking about that from a relationship perspective. And then it would be different for different sites, but that's why it's so important to understand the functionality of where you're posting.
Great, thank you. I'm not seeing any additional questions at this point. We have a couple more minutes, so if you have questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. But Jennifer, if you wouldn't mind, I'm going to share my screen and give a couple of additional Alive updates.
Go ahead. Yes, I will stop sharing. There you go.
All right, awesome. Jennifer, thank you so much. I took lots of notes, and you know, I've been doing this work for a lot of years, and there are lots of new nuggets of really great information, and I suspect that's true across the board. So thank you so much for being willing to share your knowledge and expertise with Alive and our members.
Absolutely.
Okay, just a couple more things before we let you go for the afternoon. So our next Alive Academy is going to be on June 12th. We have a really great topic. It's the relationship between volunteer roles and well-being. So we'll have Courtney Tulp, who will provide that content for us. So please mark your calendars, and you can sign up on the Alive website via the calendar. I saw a few notes in the chat about some folks on the call who are not currently Alive members. If you're not Alive members, we really encourage you to join Alive. There are so many benefits to being an Alive member. We have communities of practice, we have mentoring, we have leadership awards. Not to mention these amazing Alive Academies. So if you are not currently a member, please do consider becoming a member. And thank you, Gretchen. This the fees are a little different. It's $75 per individual. So if you go to Alive's website, you can sign up to be a member there. And then the website is here. It's volunteeralive.org. As always, Gretchen is our fearless leader and manager of Alive. And so if you have any specific questions, please feel free to reach out to Gretchen. Is membership open to Canadians? Absolutely. We have volunteer administrative professionals from all over the world. So we're not just for US-based organizations. We are for all. So again, thank you so much to Jennifer. I saw that her email is in the chat. Thank you to Gretchen, and thank you to all of you for the work that you do every day. We appreciate you joining us, and we hope to see you at the next one on June 12th. Have a wonderful afternoon, everyone.
Thanks, Rebecca. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.